Good evening. I'm Laura Jones, host of New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. And in just a few minutes, we'll begin the first debate for U.S. Senate between Republican Curtis Bashaw and Democrat Andy Kim. The two candidates are seeking the seat held by former Senator Bob Menendez. This 90-minute debate is presented by On New Jersey, the New Jersey Globe, and the Rebovich Institute for New Jersey Politics at Rider University. Let's go over the rules of this evening's debate. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to make an opening statement. After that, our panel will ask a series of questions related to national and state issues and the campaign for U.S. Senate. Now, we realize that for any number of the topics covered tonight, we could easily dedicate an entire debate to. But in the interest of covering as many topics as possible, we will keep the conversation moving along with our timeline. Respectfully, I ask both candidates to stick to their allotted time. If a candidate goes long, I'm going to hold up my hand. If that doesn't work, I'll interrupt. I also have a bell that I'm not afraid to use. The questions tonight are coming from David Wildstein of the New Jersey Globe, Micah Rasmussen of the Rebovich Institute for New Jersey Politics at Rider University, and Joey Fox of the New Jersey Globe. Questions will alternate between the two candidates. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer and 1 minute to respond. If a candidate is attacked during the response, his opponent will receive an additional 30 seconds to respond. I reserve the option of a follow-up question before moving on. Candidates will also have 90 seconds for a closing statement. Now, my job is to be the moderator, not to take sides, not to give my opinion. So I will moderate and keep this debate on course. I'm going to look to each candidate to make sure what their opponent is saying is based on fact. We conducted a virtual coin toss before the start of the debate. The winner of that coin toss is Andy Kim, so he will have the first opening statement. New Jersey debate night is getting started. Stay with us. First, though, here's a look at both campaigns' candidate videos.
My opponent thinks that because I am a Republican, I fit into this box. Well, good luck trying to define me. I'm a small business owner who built my hotel company budget by budget. I've been with my husband for 22 years. I believe our border needs to be secure. And I'm pro-parent. And yes, I'm pro-choice and believe that women, not the government, should decide what's best for them. I'm Curtis Bashaw, and I approve this message because I believe we need to put principle over politics.
Jersey politics has a certain reputation, but I believe we can change that. I'm Andy Kim, and in Congress, I championed the strongest anti-corruption bill in a generation. And I wrote a new bill to ban politicians from getting rich off their influence and trading stocks. Now I'm running for Senate to put our families above the wealthy and elite insiders that give our state a bad name. I approve this message because Jersey can be better, but we have to believe.
We vote to protect the Social Security we worked hard for. We vote because family caregivers deserve support. We vote to have a say in our future. For all the reasons why, AARP has information about when, where, and how to vote. Find the information you need to make your voice heard.
Welcome to New Jersey Debate Night. I am Laura Jones, and this is the first New Jersey Senate debate between Curtis Bashaw and Andy Kim, presented by the New Jersey Globe, On New Jersey, and the Rebovich Institute for New Jersey Politics at Rider University. Our panelists this evening are David Wildstein of the New Jersey Globe, Micah Rasmussen, director of the Rebovich Institute for New Jersey Politics at Rider University, and Joey Fox, congressional correspondent for the New Jersey Globe. Now, we've gone over the rules of the debate prior to airtime. We've also established the order of questions and responses, which will alternate between the two candidates. A coin toss was conducted earlier, won by Andy Kim. Now, it is my pleasure to welcome both Curtis Bashaw and Andy Kim to the debate stage. Gentlemen. Okay, Mr. Kim winning the coin toss. He opted for the first opening statement. So the first statement is yours. Mr. Kim, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to the New Jersey Globe, the Rebovich Institute, and On New Jersey for hosting us. I'm Andy Kim, and 50 years ago, my parents immigrated from South Korea to the United States. They didn't know anybody here in this entire continent, but they did it because they knew that they could give me and my sister a better life and more opportunities than they had. Now I'm a father of a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old, 2 little boys, and all I want for them is the same thing that my parents wanted for me. But when I look at the world right now, the chaos and the crisis out there, I'm worried about what kind of America my kids are growing up in. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm running for Senate. That's why I stepped up in public service, worked in national security, keep our country safe, worked under both Democratic and Republican presidents, served in war zones and at the White House. It's why I stepped up for Congress 6 years ago. As a Democrat that won a district Trump won twice, to show that we can build a politics that brings us together rather than divides us. And I've heard from seniors worried about the high cost of healthcare, so I passed legislation into law to lower prescription drug costs. Hearing from the Black community, the Hispanic community, others about the high cost of living, high housing, to be able to address these in fundamental ways. To hear the challenges that the LGBTQ community faces when it comes to discrimination. What I promise, though, is that whether you vote for me or not, I will be a senator for you, and I will serve your family to the best of my ability. I hope to be a senator for all of New Jersey. Thank you.
Mr. Kim, thank you very much. Mr. Bashaw, to you and your opening statement.
I'm Curtis Bashaw, and I'm running for United States Senate because I believe it's time for a change in New Jersey. We've heard from my opponent, Congressman Kim, who's a career politician and a DC insider. And I'm running in part because I think we need more people who are not from the inside, not career politicians like he and his former running mate, Bob Menendez. I'm not a politician. I'm a Jersey guy who grew up in Cherry Hill with 4 siblings. I worked summer jobs at the Jersey Shore. I built my hotel business budget by budget, payroll by payroll, restoring old hotels like Congress Hall, creating 1,000 jobs. I believe that we need to move forward in our state. We have to get things done. I believe that my opponent's going to put me in a box tonight, but I am Curtis Bashaw, no one else. I've been married to my husband for 22 years. I am pro-choice, pro-parent, pro-business. I believe in common sense. I think it's time for us to get together and move forward in this state to do a better job. And I'm looking forward to serving in the United States Senate to do just that.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for your opening statements. Now we go to our panel. David Wildstein, you are first, and you have 3 questions for our candidates. David.
Thank you. I'm going to start with some questions on affordability. As you both know, and I'll ask Congressman Kim to go first. In New Jersey and across the nation, Americans worry that the income of an average household is insufficient to afford essentials like housing and health care and college tuition, groceries, utility costs. We can probably go on and on. But Mr. Kim, you've been in Washington in the Congress for 6 years. What have you done to make living in New Jersey more affordable to the people you represent?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Well, as I mentioned earlier, making sure that we're passing legislation into law to lower prescription drug costs. You know, we've been able to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. I'm trying to pass legislation that allow Medicare recipients to get vision, hearing, dental coverage. You know, these are the types of things that I hear about, and we want to make sure we're doing that for all Americans. You know, these are the types of issues that I hear about at the 80 town halls that I've held, making sure that we're delivering for the people of New Jersey. So yes, I want to make sure we're taking the steps to build. We need a decade of building to be able to make sure that we have more housing out there to help people who are struggling. And these are the types of steps that I've been leading the charge on and hope to be able to get across the line. It's not just about the building and the lowering costs. We do need to raise our minimum wage. And that's a big difference between me and my opponent. Someone who opposed raising the minimum wage nationally from $7.25. I find that to be appalling. We need to make sure that people in New Jersey and across this country can get the kind of wages that they deserve.
You know, I'm a businessman that's created jobs, 1,000 jobs over the last 35 years. And I think that we need to make sure that we are dealing with affordability in a sensible way.
You okay?
That-
Are you okay?
yeah.
Okay. Do you want to?
I think maybe we need to take a commercial break and address some issues here on the stage. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us here on debate night and our debate for the U.S. Senate. We are going to be putting this debate on hold as we address some issues behind the scenes. And as soon as we can come back, we will come back and rejoin you if that is possible. But we appreciate you tuning in and hope to rejoin you momentarily. But right now, we need to take a break and again address some issues behind the scenes. I'm Laura Jones. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. We are back here on debate night where we last left off. David Wildstein was asking a question. Mr. Kim has answered, but if you could go ahead and repeat your question, David.
Thank you. Mr. Bashaw, we all know that Americans worry that income of an average household is not sufficient to pay for essentials. Tell me what you think you could do as a member of the United States Senate that would make New Jersey and America more affordable to the people who live here.
Thank you, David, for the question, and it's good to be here. I got so worked up about this affordability issue that I realized I hadn't eaten so much food today, so I appreciate your indulgence. Affordability is a huge issue for New Jerseyans. You know, as an employer of 1,000 people, I understand the importance of a living wage and working hard so that we can grow our economy and expand opportunity for everybody. We've done that. There's nobody that makes a federal minimum wage that works at our hotels. And so I think that it's important for affordability issues to get rid of inflation. We can't spend our way to prosperity. We have to control our government spending so that the dollars that we earn are devalued by inflation. And that to me is having business thrive, is unshackling our small businesses from too much regulation and making sure that we're growing our economy. I think the federal minimum wage is very, very low. New Jersey's is almost twice as much. So we don't have an issue with that and believe that the path to opportunity is in growth.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Bashaw, I'm going to ask this of both of the candidates, but I'll ask Mr. Bashaw to go first. In your opinion, approximately how much money must an average middle-class family of four earn a year to live comfortably in the state of New Jersey?
New Jersey is one of the most expensive states in which to live. I know that people earning $70,000 in our properties still struggle to find housing in Cape May County. It takes two incomes for a family to survive. And so I think that the cost of living, you got to be way north of any minimum wage job and have something in the mid $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 range to survive.
Thank you. Mr. Kim.
Yeah, what we're hearing, the incredibly tough experiences that so many people are facing. And it's not just about the wages. Yes, I mean, people are struggling with housing. But the way I keep hearing about it is people talking about how it feels like death from 1,000 cuts. You know, and the housing cut's certainly deep, but childcare, food insecurity is very high. And what we see writ large is it's not just about, you know, just the cost, but what we see in terms of, you know, whether or not people have the anxiety about what comes next, whether they can provide for their family. And that unpredictability is causing so much strain. I'm hearing from so many people addressing, you know, over 50% of their income going to housing costs. So yes, absolutely, you know, 60,000, 70,000 is something that people are still feeling squeezed on. And what we also see is there's a very significant racial wealth gap. You know, we saw there was a $300,000 racial wealth gap, the Black community, Latino families struggling to be able to make that meet. So we need to make sure we're taking steps to address this fundamentally.
And Mr. Kim, let me stick with you on the last question in this section. Do you believe that tax cuts for big corporations will ensure that America can compete in a global economy? And do you think that mega millionaires and billionaires ought to pay more taxes or less?
Well, I think right now it comes down to fairness, making sure that people and big corporations are able to pay their fair share. And when we see the challenges that are out there, I think that is something we should be striving for. That's the opposite of what we saw with President Trump's tax cuts, you know, being able to give tax cuts to the biggest corporations, millionaires, billionaires, saddling New Jersey with huge problems when it comes to the SALT tax cap. And that's something that I've been working to try to address, and we got to make sure we finish the job and not have that SALT cap come back. So these are the types of steps that we see squeezing so many New Jersey families. So right now, at a time when we face, you know, the greatest amount of inequality in our nation's history, it makes sense for us to think about doing that, and we can do it in a way where we can keep our global competitiveness. That's why I supported the CHIPS and Science Act, investing in semiconductor manufacturing, advanced manufacturing in America. You know, those are the types of steps that are going to allow us to make sure we're competitive globally while addressing the inequality here at home.
Mr. Bashaw.
Well, I agree with Andy Kim on the SALT tax. I think with New Jersey being 49th in what we get back from the federal government and the third or fourth largest contributor, that gap is too big, and the SALT cap is just an extra tax on our state. So I agree with that. But I also take exception to the use of the word fairness when it comes to taxes, because the implication there is that businesses aren't fair. In fact, the small business people I know are the backbones of their community. What's the percentage of fair? Who has a divine knowledge of what fair is? And so I believe in growth. I don't believe if there's not people like us. I work for the 1,000 people that work for me. Together we make an economy that covers the mortgage and rent payments for 800 families, car payments, tuition for college. These are people, if we can't have a lot of government programs if there's no one out there building businesses that are paying the taxes that fund the government. And so we do, I believe, need to get at this by not regulating our way to innovation and growth, and we can't spend our way to prosperity. We need to unshackle our businesses.
Thank you. Micah Rasmussen, time now for your first round of questions.
Mr. Kim, is there a point during which, during a pregnancy past which, you would not be comfortable voting for abortion being legal? And if so, what is that point?
Well, what we see right now is an experience where women across this country have had their rights revoked by an extremist Supreme Court that has been working hard to try to address this issue in a way that puts so many lives at risk. Hearing about Amber in Georgia who died because of complications when it comes to her abortion and her pregnancy. These are the types of restrictions that we've seen that have been clamped down and basically preventing women from being able to make decisions about their own body. So I think fundamentally our Constitution provides that sense of rights for women, and we see how that has been exploited and how any type of restriction in that way is being weaponized to be able to push forward a very extremist agenda that's hurting so many women and so many families around this country. So I certainly believe that a woman has a right to choose and make a determination about her own body and her own family.
Mr. Bashaw.
I also agree that a woman has a right to choose. I am for freedoms on these personal issues. I don't think the government should be in our homes telling us who we marry, what to do about an unwanted pregnancy, about their health decisions. So I am pro-choice, and I agree and would work on federal legislation to enshrine a woman's right to choose in this country. And I believe that should be a bipartisan effort, and I believe that the U.S. Congress is the place to do that.
Mr. Bashaw, after this week's vice presidential debate, Amber Thurman's family issued a statement that gave some additional background on what happened to her. She suffered an infection that her hospital was equipped to treat. After taking abortion pills and suffering a complication, her body didn't expel all the fetal tissue. She went to the hospital in need of a routine procedure to clear it from her uterus. But Georgia had made that procedure a felony. Any doctor who violated the new law would be prosecuted and face up to a decade in prison. So Amber waited more than 20 hours for doctors to finally operate when it was too late to save her life. The question is, what does Amber's case tell us about letting the states decide whether to ban abortions?
Well, I think government interfering in a person's medical decision with their doctor is not the right thing to do, whether it's the state or the federal government. I believe that we need to enshrine a woman's right to choose so that in all 50 states, a woman is protected in that way. I believe that we should work in a bipartisan way to enshrine a woman's right to choose federally. I think that's an important task that needs to be done. It needs to be done in a bipartisan way by people rolling up their sleeves and working out that legislation.
Well, what we saw was Mr. Bashaw during the Republican primary saying that this Dobbs decision was correctly decided and that he was happy that the decision returned to the states. Now that we're in the general election and he's passed his primary, we see a change in his position. And now saying that this is about a federal law that needs to happen across our entire country. So it's just one of those things, Mr. Bashaw, that I just fundamentally have a problem with you using the term pro-choice to describe yourself when you have talked about the importance of the Dobbs decision being correctly decided. And I just find that to be fundamentally different. And inextricably separate. And I think the people of New Jersey recognize this and understand when we are hearing talking points trying to put forward to help a political campaign rather than actual legislation, rather than actual solutions to be able to help women in this country be able to make decisions about their own body.
Mr. Bashaw, would you like 30 seconds to rebut?
Thank you. Yes, I would. I ran in a Republican primary as a pro-choice candidate. In every one of those 19 conventions I went to, I said that I didn't think government should be in our homes telling us what to do. I understand what the court did in the Dobbs decision. They believe in the separation of powers. And so they sent it back to the states, and it should go back to the U.S. Congress and get codified. I will work on that, and I will support that. The words are simple. I am pro-choice, Congressman. I am. I am for freedom in the home. I don't think government should tell me who I can marry. I don't think it should tell a woman what she can do with her reproductive health choices.
So, Mr. Bashaw, the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision has led to calls to return other human rights to the states. As just one example, in the wake of Dobbs, Lindsey Graham proposed letting states decide whether or not to ban same-sex marriages. As with abortion, is this the correct approach to protecting rights moving forward? Why or why not?
I think the court found that gay marriage was a constitutional right because it was free association of two consenting adults. And so I do not believe that the government's going to try to tell me and Will that we can't be married. I just don't believe that. And I don't think that that will happen. And I think this abortion issue coming back to the federal government to be codified will settle that as well. That's what happened with gay marriage. The decision happened, it went back to Congress, Congress passed a law.
Mr. Kim.
Well, what we saw was a Supreme Court that was packed by 3 justices by Donald Trump, that then took the extreme action of taking away the constitutional right for women to be able to make decisions about their own body, to be able to engage in the privacy that all of us are talking about in this way. So yeah, so look, I was proud to be able to work in a bipartisan way to codify same-sex marriage. To be able to do that, we did it with urgency because we heard from some of the justices that this was something that was on their mind in terms of where to go next. So I think that that's why people are so worried right now. We don't know what's coming next for this country. And we see the most extreme Supreme Court, certainly during my lifetime, if not modern history, taking these actions that are sending our country backwards. And that's something that I think the people of New Jersey recognize. And the person who is selected by the state to be in the U.S. Senate will make a decision about who are the next Supreme Court justices. And I hope people recognize the differences in which the two of us will consider as we're moving forward with that decision.
Trey Fox, now to you and your questions.
Thanks. I'd like to focus on immigration for a few questions. The first one for Congressman Kim. The term crisis is used a lot right now in terms of immigration, border crisis, migrant crisis. I'd just like to ask you straightforwardly, do you believe that there is a crisis when it comes to immigration in America right now?
There is a crisis. There is a crisis when it comes to our immigration. I'm somebody that worked in national security, working to keep our country safe. I'm also a son of immigrants married to an immigrant. And I don't think that those two are binary. I don't think those two are unable to be interlinked. And I think a lot of Americans feel that way. We should be able to have our heritage as a country that has brought in immigration, benefited from that, while also keeping our country safe. I believe we are a sovereign nation. We should be able to have an orderly process to have control over our borders. But we have to do it in the right way. I'm somebody that has supported border security measures in the right way, that we've been doing it in a bipartisan way. But we also have to address the fundamental challenges. Like, for instance, we have only 682 federal immigration judges as a country. We have 3 million pending immigration cases. It would take those judges 10 years to be able to get through that backlog. So there's ways in which we can increase the judiciary there to be able to get rid of this backlog, have a pathway forward for our DACA dreamers, and take other steps in bipartisan ways. And that's how I would want to continue to work on this issue.
Mr. Bashaw.
Well, I think it's interesting because Andy Kim voted against border security measures 7 times starting in 2023. I do think it's a crisis. It's a crisis in New Jersey. There are close to 900,000 illegals living in our state, not only making us feeling insecure, but costing us billions of dollars. I went to the border. I stood there in an unfinished section of the wall in Yuma, Arizona from 12:30 to 3 in the morning, and I watched 62 people walk into our country from all over the world. It dawned on me, we need to separate border security from immigration policy. Border security is no different than locking the back door on your house at night. If someone rings the doorbell, you invite them in or you not. A border in a sovereign nation has ports of entry. Immigration policy, on the other hand, is something we need to solve once and for all. A third of our employees are first or second generation Americans. I am pro-immigration. I think it needs to be legal, it needs to be streamlined, we need to roll up our sleeves in a bipartisan way and get this done. But politicize it with this border has been a catastrophe for our state and our nation, and it needs to be secured.
Is that Mr. Kim? Would you like a rebuttal?
Oh, well, certainly. I mean, I'm happy to talk about this more because, what we recognize are, these are the pragmatic, practical steps we can do. And I'm glad to hear Mr. Bashaw talking about this in that way. I agree with you. I do think we need to detach, and uncouple all of these issues together. Because we do need to, when we're talking about global competitiveness, make sure that we are continuing to be a magnet for talent from around the world. To be able to make sure we recognize that our growth in our economy is something that can be strengthened by immigration. And I hope that we can find bipartisan ways to be able to address that. So I appreciate your comments, Mr. Bashaw.
Thank you.
Congressman Kim, the next question is also for you. The House has taken up several bills this year that would make it easier to deport immigrants who commit certain crimes like Social Security fraud or sexual assault. You voted against those bills when they came up in the House. Why is that?
Well, the reason why I voted against those bills in the House is because, first of all, we already have laws in the books that allow for the deportation of people who are in this country that are convicted of crimes. A lot of this legislation was legislation that was not requiring a conviction in order to deport. And so I find that, in this country, we have due process. In this country, we have the right for someone to be able to have their day in court and to be able to process it through that means. So we have to make sure that as we proceed, we are still a nation of rule of laws. And that is something that needs to guide every aspect of our decision making. And we cannot make exceptions or try to cut corners because of the fear mongering that we see. And a lot of these pieces of legislation were meant to not solve problems, but to try to raise this issue up and create fear in the American people. A lot of the people that I work with in Congress that yell the loudest about immigration, they don't actually want to solve the problem. They see this as a good political weapon, something that they can use. That's why Donald Trump didn't want a vote on a bipartisan piece of legislation about immigration prior to the November election. Well, I hope we can do better.
Look, I find this interesting because when Donald Trump was president and you were a congressman, you voted to support the border wall. So now you voted 100% of the time with Biden and Harris, and you voted against common sense border solutions, telling the country that you understand that it's a crisis. It sounds like you're trying to work out the perfect bill. Meanwhile, we have 900,000 people in our state costing us billions of dollars, making us feel insecure. It doesn't add up.
Well, the reason why I support border security in the right way. And there were ways in which we can do this in a bipartisan direction. There was a Congressman, Will Hurd, a Republican, that said to himself, we don't need a wall from sea to shining sea, but there are other ways which we can do this. But if you tackle that issue of security without tackling the issues that I talked about of the brokenness of the judicial process that's causing so much of the backlog in our country, if we're not taking steps to move forward on a pathway forward, at least for our DACA dreamers, then this doesn't work together.
Look, you've been waiting for a perfect bill for 6 years, and meanwhile, millions and millions and millions of people have walked into our country. FEMA doesn't even have the money to take care of people in North Carolina and Tennessee because we've diverted money to the border crisis. It's just something that New Jerseyans are so upset about. They want to feel secure in their homes and their communities. They don't want their schools overrun with migrant kids that are taxing resources of our teachers, or the emergency rooms with people waiting in line. They want to know, and we can't afford to do this. We need to have legal immigration and secure the border now.
So, Mr. Bashaw, I actually want to ask a question that's somewhat related to that. The Haitian community in Springfield, Ohio, has obviously been in the headlines a lot. Former President Trump spread rumors about Haitians eating household pets, and lots of Republicans have used that community as a way of talking about potentially changing legal immigration rules to prevent communities like that from sort of emerging. My two-part question is, first of all, what is your response to rhetoric like former President Trump is using? And second of all, do you agree that communities like the one in Springfield present any kind of threat to native-born Americans?
I think the rhetoric is terrible. I think it's wrong to demonize a community who's here legally, helping staff and support our companies and pay taxes in America. I have, again, a third of our employees are first-generation Americans. One of the highlights of my life was being sworn in as a temporary judge in 2016 by the Cape May County judges to give the oath of naturalization to 3 employees that worked for me. They went through a legal process. They did it the right way. And so it's terrible to demonize any group. We are a land of immigrants. We welcome them. It just needs to be legal, orderly, and the border hole, the back door into our country, needs to be closed. It doesn't make sense. People don't understand it. It's a head scratcher.
Mr. Kim.
Well, this is a fundamental problem that we see that is underpinning, as I talked about earlier. So much of this problem that we face with the immigration discussion in Congress, in our politics, is encapsulated in this hate rhetoric that we just hear, the xenophobia that is being built. And I just think that that is something that has become this poison pill in a lot of the pieces of legislation. I cannot vote for some of these because it's just riddled with this type of hate speech. And something that I think is being pushed certainly at the highest levels with former President Trump and has to change. But it's sad. It really is sad to see this. And we're starting to see this in the Asian American community. When we see the rising xenophobia and now witch hunts against people, being blamed for being sympathetic or spies for the Chinese Communist Party, now that they're banning, land ownership by people of Chinese nationality and descent, something that could impact my own family. So these are the types of things that I find so despicable. And I hope that we can find ways to be able to address this. And we have to close the door on President Donald Trump's hateful rhetoric.
We're going to go back now to David Wildstein with his next round of questions.
Congressman, Russia's war with Ukraine is now in its 3rd year. Do you support the United States supplying Ukraine with long-range missiles so that they can hit targets deeper inside Russia? And how would you balance support of Ukraine with the threat of Russia using nuclear weapons?
Yeah, this is something that I think about a lot as someone who's worked in national security. I 13 years ago served as a civilian embedded with the military in Afghanistan. I've worked at the Pentagon, the White House National Security Council. So I think very carefully about some of these steps as I'm on the Armed Services Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee. So yes, we need to continue to support Ukraine. This is a war that has been an invasion of their own country. And as the United States, this is a question of what does American global leadership mean right now? As a country that has been trying to support the front lines of our democracies all around the world. And so the ability to have the long-range attack of missiles and other types of capabilities, I do think are the right steps. Because this war is one that's continuing to be challenged. And what we need to do is make sure that Ukraine has the ability to have the upper edge and put themselves in the strongest position to be able to defend themselves going forward. So I do think that that's important. What we've seen is Russia constantly draws these red lines in the sand. And they have not, they've not attacked back or changed their patterns as we move forward with F-16s and other types of capabilities, and I don't see them starting.
Mr. Bashaw.
Well, I agree we need to support our allies around the world, Ukraine, Israel. We've had chaotic foreign policy under the Biden-Harris administration. We signaled to Putin, well, if you don't go in too far, if the incursion isn't too big, maybe that's okay. I think we need peace through strength. We need to be strong. We need to enable people not just to defend themselves, but to win. And so I am an advocate for allowing Ukraine win this war. I would rather be sending treasure now and support than have Putin encroach into NATO and us have to send young men and women. We went through that in the Second World War, excuse me. We took a long time and we lost a lot of lives because we weren't using deterrence early enough.
And Mr. Bashaw, tomorrow, marks the first anniversary of the Hamas attack on a music festival in Israel. It saw over 1,200 people killed, about 200 people taken hostage. And it's important for voters to hear not just your position on where you stand, but also your understanding of what brought this conflict in the first place. How did we get here?
Well, I believe we got here because the Biden administration that Andy Kim voted with 100% of the time didn't do their job as it related to Iran. They had an appeasement plan that you supported with 150 others in a letter, and then we got rid of the sanctions and gave them back billions of dollars so they could fund Hezbollah and Hamas, their surrogates. Then we had this terrible attack. It was terrorism, and you're calling for a ceasefire a few weeks afterwards. To me, America doesn't negotiate with terrorists. Why would we ask Israel to do that? I don't understand. Then the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, you're talking about hateful rhetoric, but you voted against that on May 1st. Why? It doesn't make sense. It's not showing solidarity with the Jewish community in our state. It was an easy thing. But again, you talked about it as if it wasn't a perfect bill and there's a better bill and we could do that, but that's what happens when you're a DC insider for too long.
Well, let me answer the actual question here. And the problem here that we see, first and foremost, I want to say that I just came here from a commemoration of October 7th in Marlborough. And yes, we should always start by recognizing how horrific of a tragedy that was, and that we still have so many hostages that are held by these terrorists in Gaza with Hamas just continuing to threaten Israel. So yes, we want to make sure we're addressing that fundamentally. And I am somebody that has called for a hostage deal. You're correct. I think a lot of people want to see the hostages released. But as we stated in the question, how did we get here? This is not just from the policies of the last few years. This has been a long-standing challenge, a long-standing conflict. And someone like myself who's worked in the Middle East, understands these fundamental problems. I spent a number of my years working to counter Iranian exportation of violence throughout the Middle East. So it is a long-standing challenge, and we have to make sure we're moving forward to have that sense of a two-state solution, to be able to bring it to a close and have a durable peace. And that's something that I want to work on.
Look, we've been negotiating this for my lifetime. It's why I think we need outsiders, not career politicians in DC. I mean, to me, Hamas could release the terrorists anytime, and we could have a ceasefire. But we don't, we talk around circles. I mean, there's no moral equivalence here. There was a terrorist attack. They killed several thousand people, almost 2,000 people. And we've been dithering in these conversations, well, we're going to give them support, but maybe not. And that just emboldens Hamas. It's emboldened them. It emboldened Hezbollah. Now we've had this attack, and here we are. I don't think that the foreign policy that you've been part of has worked very well in this situation.
The foreign policy that I've been a part of is stepping up. I lead each year the appropriations for Iron Dome, making sure that Israel has what it needs to be able to defend itself, making sure that we recognize Israel's right to exist. But there's no military-only solution to this problem. And we've seen that now as we're approaching 1 year in which we have not been able to return all the hostages back to their loved ones. And we're hearing from the hostage families themselves saying we need to try something different. There needs to be space for diplomacy to be able to try to do that. That should be and always must be our top priority.
Congressman, how would you, as a senator, force China to play by the same rules as other nations, specifically regarding economic questions like tariffs or fair labor practices or intellectual property, and on issues related to human rights?
With China, you said, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, look, what we see with China is President Xi certainly taking aggressive actions. This is certainly going to be the biggest challenge that we face globally when it comes to our competitiveness. First and foremost, we need to build a wide coalition. Be able to make sure that we have the kind of engagement, especially in the Indo-Pacific. There's no NATO or EU of the Indo-Pacific. We need to make sure we're engaging with countries all throughout that region, including India, South Korea, Japan, and other powers, to be able to make sure that we're mobilizing the kind of economic might that is necessary. And I've visited Taiwan and China, and Japan and South Korea, Singapore, and elsewhere, and be able to build and marshal this effort up. But it's also about investing in ourselves. Our strongest capacity to be able to push back against the nefarious actions of the Chinese Communist Party is about making sure we're investing in our own innovation. The Chips and Science Act, the infrastructure law. These are things that are going to help us be able to compete. And we can do that without having this sense of inevitability of war and conflict. I do think we can avoid that.
Mr. Bashaw.
Look, I don't think China's our friend. They're a large trading partner. We need to be aware, and we need a level playing field. I agree with that. And so we need to make more things back at home. I support that. We need our supply chains. We just averted a big crisis at our ports. Once again, those supply chains would have come back to the forefront. So, China needs to be held accountable. It needs to be treated carefully, and we need to make sure that we are growing and have self-sustainability here to take care of ourselves.
Okay, we are going to take a quick break. We're watching Debate Night and the first U.S. Senate debate between Curtis Bashaw and Andy Kim. I'm Laura Jones. Stay with us.
We vote to protect the Social Security we worked hard for. We vote because family caregivers deserve support. We vote to have a say in our future. For all the reasons why, AARP has information about when, where, and how to vote. Find the information you need to make your voice heard.
Thanks for staying with us. I'm Laura Jones, and you're watching Debate Night, New Jersey's race for U.S. Senate, with the candidates Curtis Bashaw and Andy Kim. We have some questions from students at Rider University for the candidates. Our first one comes from Tatiana Green of Bordentown, New Jersey. Let's roll that tape.
As a young voter in college planning to pursue a law degree, I am concerned about the amount of debt I will accumulate from student loans. What future developments will be available to assist individuals like myself who will go through an extensive amount of schooling to repay their loans in a more sustainable way?
Okay, we're going to go to Mr. Bashaw for the first response.
Education costs a lot of money, and affordability of tuitions is a big challenge for all of us. Amazing that you're pursuing a law degree, and you need to feel that you're supported in doing that. You know, the federal government has loan programs. Schools have scholarships. I was on the board of Stockton University for 12 years. We built that school from 2,000 to 8,000 students. And we worked hard to create endowments, scholarships, and to make sure that education is affordable. And so as we all accumulate debt, we've got to make sure that we can handle the debt we accumulate. And we've got to work to make sure for educational opportunities that it's equitable and that people from all different backgrounds and economic abilities can pursue their dreams. So I would support programs federally to make sure that we're helping students achieve those goals.
Mr. Kim.
Tatiana, I wish you the best going forward, but you're absolutely right. These are huge challenges that are facing so many young Americans right now. And what is meant to be about opportunity, education is about creating more opportunity to be able to have that economic mobility. But what we find right now is so often that people are stuck and they're being held down by the student debt. You know, about now it's affecting when people buy cars. When my wife and I had to talk through this about our own student debt when we were getting married or about to have kids, about what it is that we can handle. I've tried to push forward steps to increase the Pell Grant. I was a Pell Grant kid, got support when I was younger, to be able to make sure we're increasing that significantly, as that hasn't changed in decades. You know, be able to make sure that you can refinance your student loans, and we can try to work to bring those student loan interest rates as close down to zero as possible. You know, trying to make these steps in ways that are fundamental and help you and others be able to have those opportunities that you deserve.
Our next question comes from Remy Mora from Lawrenceville, New Jersey.
Hello. I am Remy Mora asking a question on behalf of Rider University to the respective candidates Andy Kim and Curtis Bashaw. The other day I was walking through Trenton, New Jersey when I noticed that kids on their way home from school have to walk past people using drugs. In your view, is the problem that more drugs are leaking through the border, or is it caused by pre-existing drug addiction within Trenton, or both? Also, how can your work in the Senate change this ongoing tragedy in New Jersey's capital?
And we're going to go to Mr. Kim for the first response.
Yeah, thank you, Remy. You know, this is a massive problem that we're facing in terms of substance use disorder. We see it with the opioid crisis that's taken the lives of over 100 Americans every single year. So yes, we have been and are pressing forward on bipartisan legislation to try to increase security at the border, to be able to stop and make sure we can have more drug interdiction, to be able to stop drugs from coming in. But it's not just that problem. We're seeing a lot of challenges even within our own country. And that is something we need to make sure we're investing in, both in terms of a law enforcement, but also in terms of the ability to be able to help people get off of their addictions. It's why we worked in a bipartisan way to address something called the MAT Act, which allows for greater resources for medically assisted treatment for the opioid crisis. And we are holding accountable pharmaceutical companies and others that have been pushing opiates and other types of medication that are overly addictive onto the American people to make sure we have justice for those families that have been challenged. So this is something we do need to put more resources behind. Thank you, Remy.
Mr. Bashaw.
Well, and this, I agree, begs the question of this open border while we're waiting for the perfect bill to get passed. We have a fentanyl coming across in massive amounts, and it has created a crisis. I also believe that addiction is a disease that needs to be supported, and we need good programs in a bipartisan way to help people suffering from addiction. But I also know firsthand that the best social program is a job. I've created 1,000 jobs. We've had people that came out of recovery and work for us in our hotel companies. We've been first-time jobs for a lot of people after going through a really tough time. And so it's a growing economy. It's more opportunity that lifts us up. And we need to make sure that the private sector is growing and thriving so we can grow and develop our nation's opportunities. As an employer, we have a lot of support services for students suffering from addiction and employees. And we need to do that as communities, at state government levels, and at the federal level. But we still have to have a secure border.
Our next question comes from Nassan Carr of Williamstown, New Jersey.
Hi, my name is Nassan Carr. I am the Rider University NAACP president and the second vice president for the New Jersey State Conference Youth and College. So my question is for you. What can young people do to advocate for issues that affect our generation? And what can people like you do to advocate for us?
Okay, I believe that will go to Mr. Bashaw first. Although I believe that question was actually a repeat question. So what we're going to do, instead of, is it this?
You have a different question.
We have a
here
different
from
question.
Nassan.
I believe we have a different question.
The screen showed the old question,
It
but
did.
I'll just read it here. What can young people do to advocate for the issues that affect our generation? And how can people like you help us in this process? Well, I won't speak for Congressman Kim, but I do think that getting involved in our politics, being engaged in your community, in your civics, in your politics is a way to get involved. And more young people should get involved. I've had a full career and just jumped in as a first-time politician in January. And it's been the most inspiring and invigorating thing I've ever done to participate. And so believe that you can make a difference by joining in and being civically engaged. Lincoln said, we are of the people, by the people, and for the people. And so be engaged, talk to people who are older in public service, in civic engagement, in community groups, and get yourself involved.
Okay, and again, that question that was supposed to run is, what can young people do to advocate for the issues that affect our generation, and how can people like you help us in that process? Mr. Kim.
That question is so important now more than ever. You know, we live in the time of the greatest amount of distrust in government in modern American history. And if you're a young American, you know, I can see why there's so much cynicism and challenge. You know, someone who's 20 years old right now is someone who was born into a country in 2 wars around the world, you know, has seen the financial crisis and seen politics at each other's throats, has not seen a lot of what we would call unity and something to believe in. But I do think it's important for us to recognize that we're a part of something bigger than all of us, and we have an ability to change. Our politics isn't just for the well-off and well-connected. Each and every one of us can participate. I've been saying this line a lot lately where I say I believe that the opposite of democracy is apathy. It's if we give up and have this sense of helplessness take on over. So I think we need to make sure we are finding ways to be able to roll up our sleeves. You know, find a community group, find a way in which you can advocate, do it alongside others, as that is something that can help us sustain that and make sure we don't give in to the cynicism, the apathy, and the helplessness.
Okay, we are going to head back over to Joey Fox. You are next with your round of questions.
So both of you are seeking to join a body that famously is very deliberative, can oftentimes be very slow-moving, has a lot of unwritten rules that govern its procedures. So I want to ask you a little bit about those procedures. Congressman Kim, I'll start with you and the topic of the filibuster. Many Senate Democrats have said that they'd like to do away with the filibuster, which prevents a lot of bills from passing unless they get 60 votes. And Vice President Kamala Harris has said that she would specifically support a filibuster carve-out for abortion rights. What is your stance on keeping the filibuster, ditching the filibuster?
Well, the filibuster is something that has become weaponized. You know, I understand the idea of wanting to make sure that the voices of the minority side is able to be heard. But what we see right now is it's not even about speaking on the floor of the Senate. It is now just single individuals are able to hold up the entire legislative agenda of America. The Senate should be able to vote and be able to make sure that they can take that chance to vote and see what the outcome is. And that is what we need to restore the Senate to. I've worked in the House of Representatives for 6 years. We passed over to the Senate legislation to provide universal background checks for gun safety. We passed over legislation to be able to codify women's reproductive rights. The Voting Rights Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and other critically important pieces of legislation, only to see it just not even get to a vote, just die on the Senate floor because of the filibuster. So yes, I want to make sure that we are taking those steps, but to move forward the legislation that I know the people of New Jersey support, and they don't want to see a single senator with an extremist views be able to put a stop to that and stop America from moving forward.
Mr. Bashaw.
The Senate was conceived by the founders to be sort of the cooling saucer of our democracy. It's a House that had 6-year terms, staggered every 2 years. And I believe it was supposed to be a place for debate and to build consensus. I don't think it's wise for us to keep whipsawing back and forth when one party gets control or another gets control. I think that can destabilize us. I support the filibuster, but I think it needs to be real. I think if people are going to filibuster, they actually need to talk. They can't just, put up a flag and say, I'm filibustering. And so we need more moderates elected to the U.S. Senate. We are not going to get stuff done from the extremes. That's the way our government was intended. We need people to work together to make compromises to get things done for the good of the country. And so I could see reforming the filibuster to make sure that it's a real tool. And I agree that we need more consensus, and we need to have people that will actually work across party lines, not vote 99% with their party.
Joey.
Mr. Bashaw, my next question is sort of related to that. Confirming judges and cabinet nominees may be the most important thing that a U.S. Senator does. So I'm curious, if you win the seat in the Senate, but the opposite party wins the presidency, would you be open to voting for their nominees who you disagree with ideologically, but who you believe are otherwise well qualified?
Well, first of all, I don't think there should be litmus test ideologically on judges. I think we need competent judges, reasonable judges, judges that are going to be interpretive of our Constitution and our documents, independent. So, and I believe that when my party's right, I'm going to support it. And when my party's not right, I'm going to stand up against it. I'm an independent voice. And so, yes, I'm going to vote for the judge that I think is best qualified. When you become a senator, you get to vet judges. You meet with them. You ask them questions. You take the measure of the person by looking at them and getting to know them. So that's how I would approach it. And I will be an independent voice for New Jersey and vote my conscience, not party.
Mr. Kim.
Well, what we see with Mr. Bashaw, you're right. We don't have before us judges, justices, nominations that we know will come, so that's all hypothetical. What we have seen from Mr. Bashaw is the one endorsement that he has made is for Donald Trump to be president of the United States. And again, we get a sense of his judgment from that, and it's something that I deeply disagree with. We've seen 3 justices put on the Supreme Court from Donald Trump. And we've seen the Supreme Court take the most extremist turn, certainly in my lifetime, and something that is going against so many of the fundamental beliefs that people in New Jersey hold. So I am worried about Mr. Bashaw's ability to make decisions about Supreme Court justices, as we've seen him make a decision about who should be the next president that I think is very much out of line with a lot of people in New Jersey. I want to make sure that we step up as someone who's worked in public service, understanding the challenges that come and making sure that we can have the right leaders there that are going to make sure that they protect the Constitution of the United States, including protecting a woman's right to choose.
Mr. Bashaw, would you like a rebuttal? 30 seconds.
Sure. Look, every American has to make a choice this fall. Elections are binary choices, and we all have to make a decision. I don't believe we can have 4 more years of the same, of open border, rampant inflation, crazy budget expenditures. I do think that I am an independent voice. I am pro-choice, and I'm going to vet judges based on their ability and based their reasonableness and their loyalty to the Constitution.
Okay, now we're going to let the candidates ask each other a question. And first we have Curtis Bashaw will be asking Andy Kim. And each of you have 2 minutes to respond. Then you will have a chance to ask Mr. Bashaw a question. So over to you, Mr. Bashaw.
Great. Well, I would like to dive in a little bit to Iran and Israel. I don't understand the fact that you supported the appeasement program with Iran and then the release of those sanctions. Then after this terrible attack, whose anniversary is tomorrow, calling for a ceasefire over and over again, and then voting against the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. How can New Jerseyans, and especially our Jewish communities, trust you on this issue?
No, I'm really glad that you asked this question, because I believe you've been putting a lot of misinformation out there. First and foremost, what I supported was a hostage deal, to be able to make sure that we get the hostages released. And I think that's something that a lot of people want. I've had the chance to talk to a lot of the families of the hostages. They do not feel like their loved one is being prioritized in the way that it needs to. And I hope that all of us, both of us, can certainly agree on that necessity. So that is what I've been talking about, making sure that there is a bilateral agreement that can see the hostages released, to see the violence come to a close, as we see so much of that challenge. The longer and longer that this conflict goes on, the harder and harder it is going to be able to have the hostages released. What we also recognize is that, yes, I am somebody who has, since day one in my time in Congress, stood up for the Jewish community against anti-Semitism. And that is something I experienced, with my work in Ocean County, immediately seeing hateful speech put out there on Facebook attacking the Jewish community there, and brought together a community group to be able to respond to that. And what I am doing in Congress is supporting the Countering Anti-Semitism Act, the largest effort in American history to counter anti-Semitism. And this isn't just words, it's real money. The top issue that I get, the top request that I get from so many Jewish American leaders in New Jersey is on the nonprofit security grant program, making sure that there are real resources to build up the security program at temples and synagogues and other places, because the threat is real. So yes, I support being able to move forward on the strongest stuff, about the nonprofit security grant program, about making sure that Holocaust studies is taught. They can have a national coordinator to address it. And this is bicameral and bipartisan, so we can get that across the line. And I hope that is a bill that you can support, but so far you've been nothing but critical of my support for that piece of legislation. And that's the kind of step that I will continue to fight on.
Okay, now, Mr. Kim, your question to Curtis Bashaw.
Well, Mr. Bashaw, I wanted to return to this question, because you said earlier that you're pro-choice, that you support federal legislation to move forward. But I'll be honest with you, with the work that I've done in Congress, seeing the Republicans constantly against our effort to codify Roe v. Wade. And what we see right now, we have 10 states right now that don't have exceptions. They have total bans on abortion, don't have exceptions for rape. 6 states that don't have exceptions for life of the mother. So I think the people of New Jersey deserve to hear what specifics are you talking about when it comes to federal legislation? Because if it's done incorrectly, it could actually supersede New Jersey's law and continue and change what women here in New Jersey would experience.
Great. I'll answer it again. I'm pro-choice. I believe that a woman's right to choose is her decision. I would work with a bipartisan effort to codify that. I understand that federal legislation may supersede, and I don't want to do anything to take a woman's right to choose away in New Jersey. And so I don't know how else to explain that I'm pro-choice, but to say that I'm pro-choice. And I know it's inconvenient for you that I'm a pro-choice Republican. But I would say to people, how much better to have somebody who's in the middle that can caucus with the Republicans to hold them accountable to the values of freedom than have somebody that votes 99% of the time with his party and is part of the progressive caucus way over on the left. I think we need that dynamic back in our governance. I look forward to caucusing on this issue and trying to get it resolved through our legislative branches so that we put this question, which has divided us for decades, to bed.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you. We're going to go back to our panel now. David Wildstein of the New Jersey Globe, you are up.
Thanks. Mr. Bashaw, I'll start with you. I want to talk about the pharmaceutical industry in New Jersey. And there's about 70,000 employees throughout the state that work in New Jersey research facilities or on finding cures for life-saving drugs. Their economic impact of the state is tremendous, but how do you balance the need to lower the cost of prescription drugs with an obligation to protect New Jersey's workforce and economy?
I will answer that question as best I can. New Jersey is the medicine chest of the world. Our research and development facilities are miracle workers, and they benefit consumers. I believe that there's a lot we can do in between those two ends of that supply chain. There are PBMs and middle people taking all kinds of costs and breaks and money out of the system. I believe that we need to make sure that healthcare can cross state lines so that there's more competition. Look, I have provided health insurance for every employee that we have since 1989. I know how hard it is to negotiate healthcare. I know how expensive. We provide pharmaceutical benefits to our employee. We were the first hotel and restaurant to do that in Cape May County when we did it. So we are on the front lines of this as a business person, not as a government person who is, making these rules. We experience it. And I believe that we have a lot we can do with these middlemen and PBM, making it more competitive across state lines. We want to work with, thank you.
Yep, time is up. My apologies, Mr. Kim.
Well, my father was a medical researcher who dedicated his life to trying to cure cancer and Alzheimer's. So I saw the importance of investing in research and development, making sure that we're taking those steps. That's why not only did I help pass the CHIPS and Science Act, but the science portion is so critical. To be able to invest in our NIH, the NSF, and the other components that are going to be able to build upon. So these pharmaceutical companies, they're not just doing the research on their own, they're building off of a lot of the basic science, the other actions that we're doing as a country and as a government. We should be able to follow through with that. And so these are steps that I think are important. But when we see, for instance, I heard from someone who needs insulin, they're saying that insulin is as important for them to stay alive as air and water. The medicine is not like a normal commodity. This is not like a TV. You can wait for Black Friday to see the prices drop. They need it. And what you see right now is, a lot of times that price is out of reach. And it causes so much strain. That's why capping insulin at $35 and other steps allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices are so important.
And Congressman, there's an undeniable mental health crisis going on in America today. Senator George Helmy, who both of you would hope to replace, said in his first speech on the Senate floor that in just 7 years, the number of youth hospitalized for anxiety has increased by 50%, and that the proportion of hospitalizations for self-harm have increased by nearly 100%. What's your plan to address the need to provide essential services to those who need it the most?
Yeah, thank you, David, for this question. It's literally one of the top issues that I hear about, and I already told Senator Helmy that if I elected, that is something that I hope to be able to continue. Yeah, I'm a father of a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old, a second grader and a fourth grader. So this is very personal to me. This is partly why I created the Congressional Dads Caucus, make sure that we're looking out for our kids and to be able to address this. And then when a top issue that I hear about from school administrators and parents is about the mental health crisis. I'm hearing about elementary school kids that are now having suicidal ideation, things that we should find unacceptable. But what we see right now here in New Jersey, not even every school has a school nurse, let alone someone who has mental health capabilities, and especially pediatric. We need to invest in ensuring that we are building up that workforce. We do not have the workforce we need as a country to address the mental health challenges. But we should also make sure we're addressing some of the fundamental sources, social media, phones, other things like that are causing so much of the challenge. And these are things that I want to make sure I'm prioritizing in my time in the Senate.
Mr. Bashaw.
I agree. Mental health is an area that is one of the last stigmas, and we need to make sure that people feel safe and secure getting help and assistance. It's a super important thing to do, and I agree with you. We need to look at the causes. I think there probably is a correlation between some of these draconian lockdowns that we went through with the schools. And so we need to take care of these young people as they mature into adulthood and make sure they have the support and services. In my business, we have counseling available. We have all kinds of support programs for our employees because we know that this is a frontline issue. So this is something that should be tackled in a bipartisan way, that we should work to make sure that the resources are there and that people can get the help that they need.
And Mr. Bashaw, New Jersey counts nearly 100,000 Cuban Americans among its residents, and a majority of them are now second and third generation Americans. Where do you want to see the relationship between the United States and Cuba headed over the next 5 years, and how much of a priority do you place on the return of Joanne Chesimard before the U.S. moves forward?
Well, I think the Cuban American community is a huge community in our state, and is one that has been very important. I think that there's great patriots in that community because they feel badly for the situation in their country, and they want to see it get resolved. How that happens and the U.S.'s role is something that, you know, I would like to learn more about when we get to United States Senate. I mean, there are these issues that are out there that have been there for a long, long time. So what is the solution and how we resolve that requires people to get in there and unpack it and work on it and come up with a solution.
Mr. Kim.
Well, certainly the challenges are very real, and we saw that from the July 13th political repressions from a few years ago, and that is something that we have to make sure that we see clear-eyed in terms of the problem. So yes, this is something that is very much at our forefront of our understanding in terms of the difficulties when it comes to that, trying to make sure that we're working with building a coalition across the Americas to be able to address this, because any actions we take, whether sanctions or others, need to be done in a multilateral way that can ensure that they are successful, put down the strongest possible pressure for the change, for the release of some of those political prisoners from July 13th and other challenges that are out there. But while we're doing that, I do think that there are some steps that we can take in terms of business connections and other sorts of commerce components to be able to do this in a way that can certainly open up resources to the Cuban people, but still be able to make sure we're creating the kind of restrictions necessary to create the political pressure to be able to combat the repression that we've seen. So those are the steps I want to make sure we're continuing.
Okay, we're going to head back over to Micah Rasmussen for your round of questions.
Mr. Kim, this week the nation's economy averted a crisis with the tentative settlement of the longshoremen strike. What lessons do you take from this near miss, aside from that in every big story there's always a Jersey angle?
No, you're absolutely right. Look, this is something that I think about a lot because right now, as I said, we live in the time of the greatest amount of inequality in our American history. And we want to make sure that we're having a economy that works for everybody, including the workers, making sure the workers can get a fair share. And across New Jersey, we've seen whether project labor agreements and other steps moving forward to be able to support our workers. And I think that that's important here in New Jersey. And we want to make sure we bring that across our entire country. Actions like the PRO Act that can make sure that we're codifying the ability for collective bargaining throughout our country, I think, is important. But what we also see is that we need to make sure that pressure is being put for people getting to the negotiating table. And right now we see a lot of big corporations trying to prevent the ability for workers to be able to have their voices heard collectively. So those are steps that we absolutely need to be able to codify, to be able to address the kind of economic separation that we see that is hurting so many workers in America.
Mr. Bashaw.
Look, I'm very glad we averted that strike. It would certainly have revealed supply chain challenges that we still face in the country because we don't make as many things here as we used to. We have 1,000 employees. I believe that employees have a right to work together to make the best deal for themselves. We've seen, this issue of fairness and level playing field. We've worked across our state, built things with union labor and built things with mixed jobs. And we think that it's very important for our economy to make sure that we have a level playing field, that we're unshackling our businesses from too much regulation so they can grow. It's hard to micromanage an economy. I don't think price controls are a solution to inflation. I don't think spending trillions of dollars is a solution to the inflation that resulted because we spent trillions of dollars a little while ago. The economy of our country needs to be freed up. We are the land of opportunity. We're the place that made miracles for so many people. And so I believe in a free market. I believe in a robust labor force. And I believe that they have the right to bargain. And we need to hear them out and do what we can do.
Mr. Bashaw, much of Cape May County will be underwater this century, according to many studies from Rutgers, Penn State, and even the Wetlands Institute in Stone Harbor. Yet every community in the county is opposing new flood rules because they will hamper new development. What can be done to protect communities that prioritize development over their own flood protection?
Development is an issue that I've heard in all 21 counties of this state on this campaign trail. Also flooding. We have to, we are a home rule state. Each city and town can make their own rules. We've tried to overlay things, and sometimes, one size fits all regulations can be stultifying and really harmful. The overlays that the DEP wants to do down in Cape May County are really tough. It would shut the county down. And so we need to make sure that we're addressing our environmental questions in a responsible way so that we're managing affordability and practicality with the goals that are set before us.
Mr. Kim.
Well, first and foremost, when we're talking about the challenges of climate change, we need to go straight at it in terms of addressing the fundamental problem of climate change, which is why I supported and voted on the Inflation Reduction Act, the largest investment in our nation's history in combating climate change. These are important steps forward, and when you pair that with the bipartisan infrastructure law that I helped pass into law, we see the importance of making sure our communities are resilient. So not just trying to tackle climate change, but making sure we're taking steps to be able to create the resilience, the living shorelines, raising the roads, and other steps that we can take to be able to protect our communities from the flooding. As someone who represented Ocean County for 4 years in Congress, we were able to work in a bipartisan way to be able to address that. And in trying to ensure that we have organizations like the Army Corps of Engineers and others to be able to support and be able to provide the kind of guidance on what it is that we can do with our community. So those are incredibly important, but I will say we also need to fundamentally shape and address the issues of flood insurance in our country. And we've seen how New Jerseyans, a lot of them got screwed over after Superstorm Sandy. They increased costs, the FEMA coming down on that and making sure that they are continuing to struggle after years and years. That's something we want to make sure we're fixing.
Mr. Kim, advocates continue to work on gun safety measures, even though the Supreme Court's current majority has made it clear that very little will pass their muster. What sorts of gun violence prevention would you support in the Senate that you believe could survive judicial review?
Well, first and foremost, the actions that we've taken in Congress so far is I helped pass the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the largest effort to address gun violence in 2 decades. Did it solve all the problems? Of course not. But it was a step forward, trying to make sure we're engaged and trying to keep at it to build the kind of coalition we need to. As I said earlier, one of the most powerful moments of my time in Congress was when we passed universal background checks for gun safety through the House of Representatives. And that is something that is supported by over 95% of Americans. And I believe that that's something we can get across the line in the United States Senate. But again, as we talked about earlier, the filibuster has been standing in the way. So I do think that there are sensible ways and we can have the reforms to pass legislation like that, including not just that, but also red flag laws is something that I believe we can build a bipartisan coalition on, hopefully going forward if we're able to take the temperature down. And that's something that I want to commit myself to be able to address because it is so scary, the level of gun violence out there affecting so many of our kids, so many of our communities right now.
I agree that we need to make sure we're keeping our kids safe in the schools. We need to work on common sense gun reform measures. I think that universal background checks are important. I have a farm. I have a license for guns. I went through a process in New Jersey. It's one of the strictest in the nation, and it works. I also think that, just like our border has a back door, I don't think these loopholes through gun shows makes any sense. If we're going to have background checks, we should have them for any gun purchase, and we shouldn't have a back door into that. So I'm a person, as a Republican, that would work on bipartisan common sense solutions to make sure that we're keeping people safer. We were talking about mental health earlier. We need to keep guns out of the hands of those who are mentally struggling with their mental health. We need to keep guns out of the hands of criminals. And so there's a lot of work that can be done here in a common sense way, and that's what I look forward to doing too in the U.S. Senate.
Okay. Okay, Joey, we're going over to you for your round of questions, your last round of questions.
Mr. Bashaw, former President Trump kind of famously said at the last presidential debate that he had a concept of a plan when it came to health care and the Affordable Care Act. Do you have more than concepts when it comes to your health care plan, specifically with regards to expanding, repealing, replacing, et cetera, the Affordable Care Act?
I believe that the Affordable Care Act is there and it needs to stay. I wouldn't be looking to repeal it. If anything, I would be looking to make it better. As somebody that's provided health insurance for 35 years for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of employees, I understand how important that is to their well-being and pursuit of their happiness. And so I want a robust healthcare system. I love the innovation that happens in America, and people from other countries that have one-size-fits-all healthcare want to be here for innovation. So I think we need to make sure we have a robust healthcare market. I think the Affordable Care Act is part of that.
Mr. Kim.
Well, I want to start by just making clear that Donald Trump did not save the Affordable Care Act, whatever J.D. Vance wants to say or others. I mean, I stepped up to run for Congress 6 years ago because we saw firsthand Republicans in Congress trying to gut the Affordable Care Act, trying to gut pre-existing condition protections. Those are the types of efforts I'm going to continue to fight against, while trying to build out a stronger health care for everyone. I think it's one of the greatest injustices of our society in America that we don't have everyone having the kind of access to care that they need to be able to stay healthy. And that includes making sure that Medicare has vision, hearing, dental coverage. I mean, who needs vision, hearing, dental coverage more than our seniors? To lower the prescription drug costs. And most recently, my father this past summer suffered from a major health crisis. And we've seen just the brokenness firsthand in my family of elder care in this country and the challenges that come with it and the expensive price tags that are bankrupting my father as well as so many other seniors in this nation. And we absolutely need to address that, and that's something that I hope to be able to get across the line in the U.S. Senate.
Congressman Kim, crime rates nationwide are dropping, and some violent crime rates are at their lowest level in decades. But it's pretty clear that not everybody necessarily sees that. Some people still feel under threat. Some people still feel like their communities aren't safe. What's your plan both to keep those crime stats trending in the right direction, but also to bridge that disconnect between the stats and people's lived experiences?
Well, look, it's absolutely important for us to make sure that there's security in our community. As I said, my parents, they chose New Jersey because of the safe communities and good public schools, and that's something we need to make sure we're continuing. So yes, I'll continue to invest in law enforcement, but I've been able to work, for instance, with a town in Ocean County, Stafford Township, be able to work with them to be able to address how we can be able to best keep our community safe, not just when it comes to law enforcement officers, but getting social workers embedded with our law enforcement. Really tangible steps to be able to address some of the mental health challenges that are out there and other steps to be able to have more tools at our disposal. And I think when we see that we can move in that direction, I hope that the people of New Jersey are able to see what benefits we get from that. So it's going to keep us safe, but make sure that we're doing it in the right way to be able to bring down some of the other challenges we face, and also be able to make sure we're getting the word out about what it is we can do to be able to have that clear picture about the safety within our community. And that's on us and others to have a better articulation on.
Mr. Bashaw.
Well, I'm very proud to have received the endorsement of all 3 police unions in the state of New Jersey and 2 national unions as well, 5 endorsements, because we do support law enforcement. I think also some of the progressive caucus lobbying for some of these bail reforms and different laws. I mean, we had 3 petty crime issues that were serious, on the boardwalks on Memorial Day weekend, and we couldn't do anything with those young people. And so there needs to be common sense reform, and this goes also to this open border that we're waiting for the perfect bill on. But the reality is there's almost 900,000 people in our state that are coming into communities all over the northern counties of our state who are making people feel insecure in their homes. They're not making this up when their car's broken into. And so we need to secure the border. We need to support law enforcement. Safety and security is a huge issue in New Jersey right now, and that's something that I will work very hard on in the United States Senate.
And lastly, whoever is elected to this seat will have a vote when the results of the 2024 presidential election are certified. I'm asking you, will you commit on the stage right now to voting to certify those results, even if they're not the results in the election that you're hoping for?
I believe the peaceful transfer of power is one of the most precious bedrock things that support our democracy and our country. Washington wrote that letter. He said, I'm not seeking a third term, and King George was mystified how he could do that. I believe in the process and would certify an election that's run through our country, through the system that we have, and make sure that we have that peaceful transfer of power.
Mr. Kim.
That's so important. I'm glad, Mr. Bashaw, that you said that. And I hope you can have a conversation with some of the other people in the Republican Party about this, because it is important. I agree with you. You know, as someone who worked abroad in failing democracies and failed states, you know, the peaceful transfer of power was the essential component to understanding whether the health of a democracy and whether it was going away. And the fact that on January 6, 2021, we failed that test as the United States. And I was there at the Capitol that day, and I hope we never have anything like that ever again. So absolutely, I would ensure that we support and certify the election results of the 2024 election, regardless of what the results are in terms of whose party is on top. The American people need to know that they can trust and believe in their democracy.
Okay, we're getting close to the end of our debate, so we're going to go to David Wildstein. You have the final questions for the evening.
Thank you. Congressman, what keeps you, when you're thinking about the issues that are facing America, what is the one thing that keeps you up at night?
Yeah. Well, the one thing that keeps me up at night the most right now, is just about the deep instability that's out there. And, yes, it's about the high cost of living, the challenge. I hear that from so many people. But even when I tell them, like, well, do you think things are getting better or worse? They're just saying, look, it's just so unpredictable. And as someone who's worked in national security my whole career, there's nothing I hate more than unpredictability. So when I think about my kids, I really do think that the next 4 to 5 years are going to shape the next 4 to 5 decades of this country. And I'm worried about what comes next. That we live in the most unstable global environment I've ever seen as someone who's been a national security official. I've never seen it this chaotic, with the prospects of war to bring our country in this close. When I look at the challenges we face with our economy when it comes to the political polarization, it's unfortunately right now feels like it's getting worse, not better. So that's what keeps me up at night, is just not knowing what this country is going to look like when my kids are my age.
Mr. Bashaw.
I got into this race because I love this country, and I believe that we do need to come together. I think we're missing the forest for the trees. We are the greatest exception to tyranny in the history of humankind. Our freedoms of speech, worship, enterprise, association, and conscience come with a price, and that price is that we have to share them with our neighbors with whom we disagree. Freedom's a little bit messy. And if people want certainty, there's countries with controlled economies or one religions, but that's not our country. I worry that our civic discourse is not what it should be because we have a winner-take-all mentality on both extremes, and that we need to make sure we understand the foundations, that freedom means that we can live our lives and pursue our happiness. That freedom means that we can buy, sell, and get gain and grow the economy. I am worried about the race to the bottom that we've been on with a Democratic monopoly in our state and this overspending that we're doing, the inflation, and then we think the solutions that I'm hearing from the Democrats, that it's going to be more spending and price caps as if you can micromanage an economy. So I worry about that.
Time's up. David, final question.
We'll see if we can end this debate with something a little less somber and a little bit more optimistic than the last question. I'll start with you, Mr. Bashaw. What makes you most hopeful about the future of the state of New Jersey?
I'm hopeful because the voters are ready for change. I think we've had pendulum swings from extremes, and people just want common sense again. You feel it everywhere you go. It's not a party thing. It's Republicans, it's independents, it's Democrats. I'm hopeful because every year we welcome 180 J1 college students to work at our hotels on a visa program, and I hear from them how they think that America is the hope of the world and the land of opportunity. And I believe that we can do better in our state by trusting our citizens again, by unshackling our businesses from too much regulation, and by letting the marketplace work. We are a productive, independent, scrappy state with people who are tired of their kids moving away, their grandkids living in North Carolina. They want New Jersey back. I got in this race because I'm an optimist. I believe in the future. I think that we can do better by rolling up our sleeves and having a few more political outsiders and business people serving us in Washington.
Mr. Kim.
There are a lot of things to be worried about and concerned about, but there are things that give me great optimism about what comes next as well. You know, we're on the cusp of one of the most extraordinary technological innovation eras in human history. And things that I've seen just in the last year or two that I never imagined I would see during my lifetime. And it's being built here in the United States. These companies that are leading the charge are innovated by people educated here. The businesses are being grown here. That's why I want to make sure we're supercharging that. The CHIPS and Science Act, bipartisan legislation, the largest investment to address advanced manufacturing in our nation's history. There needs to be a lot more of that. What's the 2.0? You know, what are the engagements that we can do to make sure that the United States is leading the charge on AI, doing it in a responsible way, being able to show the rest of the world what it means to be able to innovate? I think we are on the cusp of another century of American innovation, and that excites me. But we got to make sure the politics don't get in the way, and we can let that be able to engage.
Okay, it's time now for closing statements from our candidates. Andy Kim, you are closing statements. You have 90 seconds.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much to, again, the New Jersey Globe, the Reverbich Institute with On New Jersey for hosting us here. And Mr. Bashaw, it's been a pleasure to be able to talk with all of you. To the people of New Jersey, I hope this gave you a better sense of where we stand on the issues, but I hope it gave you a better sense of who I am and why I'm trying to do this. You know, I never thought that I'd be in politics. You know, I come from a family that never talked about politics at the dining room table. You know, I'm a son of immigrants, a public school kid. Whoever thought that I have a shot to be the next senator of my home state? I feel humbled by this opportunity. But what I hope you take away is what I'm trying to do with this. That I'm somebody who deeply, fundamentally believes that Election Day is the starting line, not the finish line. And if I have the great honor to be able to represent this state in the U.S. Senate, I want to do it not just with honor and integrity, but be able to take on these big challenges that we face. To be a workhorse and be able to engage in that fundamental way. Because as I said earlier, this is a historic time for this country, whether we like it or not. And trust me, I'd rather live not through historic times. I'd rather be able to live through simpler times where I can see my two little boys a little bit more. But unfortunately, this is the time that we're in. And I'm going to do everything I humanly can as a father, as someone who grew up here in New Jersey and has my heart here, to try to make sure that we address this and be able to fix this country that I know all of us believe in. I'll be certainly humbled for the vote of the people of New Jersey. Thank you.
Mr. Bashaw, over to you. Closing statements. You have 90 seconds.
Thank you, and thank you, Congressman Kim, for the conversation and for having us here tonight. I want to address my closing remarks to the moms and the women in New Jersey. I will work for security and safety for your families by supporting a secure border, law enforcement, and common sense gun reform. I will work for affordability and opportunity for New Jersey so that our kids and grandkids can actually stay here and thrive. I'm a business person that created 1,000 jobs. I've been endorsed by the United States Chamber of Commerce. I'm a person that likes to bring people together to get things done. We have 5 law enforcement endorsements. It's time to make us safe again. I also will work to protect our freedoms. I am pro-choice and pro-parent, and I believe in peace through strength. I think if you want more of the same, a career politician who will rubber stamp higher taxes, rampant inflation, and an open border, then you can vote for my colleague here. But if you want change, if you want someone that will get things done for New Jersey, I think the choice is for me. Listen, when my party's right, I will support it. When my party's not right, I'll stand up against it. I am a moderate, common sense person that will work to be a voice for New Jersey for all of us in the United States Senate. So if you entrust me with your vote, I will be that voice, and together we can get things done for our state again. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. And that concludes New Jersey Debate Night. I'd like to thank the candidates, Curtis Bashaw and Andy Kim, for their time and their responses. Thank you to our panelists, David Wildstein, Micah Rasmussen, and Joey Fox. Also to the New Jersey Globe on New Jersey and the Rebovich Institute for New Jersey Politics at Rider University for producing this debate. And thanks to C-SPAN for airing the debate. We invite you to stay tuned because immediately following the debate, we're going to have a conversation with our panelists, talk a little bit more about the debate and get their reactions and insight. After that, both candidates for U.S. Senate will hold a press briefing that we will carry as well. I'm Laura Jones. Remember, Election Day in New Jersey is November 5th. Head over to onnj.com if you'd like to see the debate again. We thank you so much for watching.
We vote to protect the Social Security we worked hard for. We vote because family caregivers deserve support. We vote to have a say in our future. For all the reasons why, AARP has information about when, where, and how to vote. Find the information you need to make your voice heard.
And welcome back. I'm Laura Jones, and for the past 90 minutes, we have been listening to the two candidates running for U.S. Senate debate here, and we've been listening to Curtis Bashaw and Andy Kim. I'm joined back now with our panelists, David Wildstein of the New Jersey Globe, Joey Fox of the New Jersey Globe, and Micah Rasmussen of the Rovich Institute for New Jersey Politics at Rider University. Gentlemen, it was a spirited debate, so I'm going to get each of your reaction. We're going to talk a little bit, and then we're going to be carrying a press conference live with both of the candidates, speaking with reporters. So, David, let me just get your thoughts. What did you think of the night and the debate, the content covered?
Laura, this is what you want in a U.S. Senate race, is two very decent people who stand next to each other or across from each other, and they talk about serious policy differences. You saw areas where Andy Kim and Curtis Bashaw agreed. You saw a lot more where they disagreed. They weren't, they weren't hugely apart on some things. On some things, they were maybe miles apart. But this is what you want in democracy, is for voters to see the two candidates, hear what they have to say, and then they have to do their job, which is to vote and determine which of the two they think best suits their beliefs.
Joy, as a reporter, what would you say the headline is of the evening from this debate? What struck you?
I think that you saw two candidates who were each trying to convince voters, maybe successfully, maybe unsuccessfully, that they are sort of the proper representation of New Jersey, that they, not just that they would be a good senator, but that they would be a good senator for this state in particular. And I think you saw from Andy Kim, that was him emphasizing his work that he's already done in Congress, that's work that Democrats have already done. Obviously, New Jersey is, in general, a state that leans towards Democrats. And I think that one of the big headlines of the night was you saw Curtis Bashaw really emphasizing that he wasn't just a standard Republican, because a standard Republican probably doesn't win an election in New Jersey. The Republicans who have won in recent years in governor's races have been moderate Republicans who know when to break with their party. And that's something that he emphasized repeatedly. He called himself pro-choice about 10 different times. He said all these things where if my party's right, I'll vote with them. If my party's wrong, I'll vote against them. And that is probably the message that a Republican needs to have any chance in New Jersey. Will it make him win? I have no idea, but it's clear that he knows that that is the message that he needs to be working with.
Now, Mike, I'd love to get your reaction. And what our audience didn't see is off camera. You brought a number of students from Rider University here, and they also were helping us out with our production. We're very grateful to them for that. But what are your reactions, and what were some of your students talking about their takeaways from this debate?
Yeah, they had a great learning experience tonight. And one thing is that they were struck by how much the candidates did agree. They think that that's a departure. Of course, we did see that last week in the vice presidential debate as well, so maybe we've got a new trend here, turning the page. So they were struck by that. They were struck by how Curtis recovered from his moment at the beginning of the debate where he began to fall forward, and he did have a very good debate performance after that. So I think everybody was gratified to see that, very relieved to see that for him. But it was a great experience for them. They learned a lot about both candidates. I think Andy Kim was very animated, maybe more so than usual. He came out trying to score points and to try to point out differences between himself and Bashaw. And I think he did that pretty sharply, maybe more sharply than usual.
Okay, all right, gentlemen, our candidates are here. They're waiting to come out. Again, we are going to have each of the candidates come out. They're going to speak with reporters. Curtis Bashaw is first, so we're going to let him go ahead and walk in. We have a number of reporters here. They will be able to speak with him and ask him questions. We're going to have that audio pulled up so that you can hear that. And Mr. Bashaw, whenever you are ready, you can take the floor and answer questions from reporters.
Great. I'm here. I'm ready.
Reporters, if you have questions, feel free to jump on in.
Just to clear up the situation, what happened at the beginning? Was it a medical issue? Did you just have a moment you glazed over? Or?
I think it's 73,000 miles on the car since January 23, and working really hard and not remembering to eat today.
Have you ever been tested for epilepsy or for diabetes, or are you being treated for?
No, none of that. No. I just felt a little lightheaded because of, I think, the day, the build-up, the campaign, and a lack of food.
What did you think of the debate? How do you think that you did, and how did it go?
I enjoyed the conversation with Congressman Kim and the issues that were raised by the panel, and I thought it went really well, other than making a little bit of a spectacle there at the beginning.
Had you debated before in any format? I mean, I know you're a first-time candidate, but
No, I have not.
We heard you say over and over again that you're pro-choice, but could you please clarify what this bipartisan bill that you would support in Congress looks like? Because obviously there's a lot of, the devil is definitely in the details when it comes to, pregnancy and a woman's
Look,
choice.
I think that we need to get people together to caucus and to work out something that's reasonable that could get a majority of people to vote on it. So I can't predict exactly what that would look like. I would just be an advocate to make sure that there's a woman's right to choose is codified in all 50 states. And we want to also make sure that we're not limiting rights for people that live in New Jersey.
So New Jersey has essentially few limits. So would you support something that's less or more restrictive than is currently the law in New Jersey?
Look, I think that we need to get a law on the books so that we don't have tragedies happening like are happening in some states that have very extreme limits on abortion. And so I would work with Democrats and Republicans to try to make that happen.
And if it's 12 weeks, it's 12 weeks.
I'm not a doctor and I'm not a woman, and I just know that I will work to codify a rule that is passable by a majority of people so that we don't have tragedies happening like we've happened in some states.
You said the U.S. is the greatest exception to tyranny in the history of humankind, and obviously that's true until it's not true. You said that you would accept the results of the election. If Donald Trump, who's evaded at times whether he will accept the results, if he refuses to accept the results, will you have regretted your endorsement of him?
Elections are binary choices. We each have to choose as citizens between the two people that are running. And we all have to make choices about that. I don't think we can have 4 more years of the same. I don't believe that he is able in 4 years' time to undo our democracy. I believe that the separation of powers, the safeguards that we have are in place. And I worry about the direction we're going with our economy, inflation, the border. And so, but I know people of goodwill will disagree with me. Clearly half the country is split on the issue of who should be president of the United States. So I also know that I'm running against Andy Kim in the U.S. Senate for New Jersey. I'm not running for president. So I have to make a choice just as you do and every voter. And so that's going to happen, but I believe that there's going to be people that vote for Kamala Harris that vote for Curtis Bashaw because they think in this Senate race in New Jersey with Andy Kim, I'm the better candidate to get things done for our state.
I know you supported the Supreme Court decision related to bump stocks. Would you support an assault weapons ban?
I would work in a bipartisan way to have reasonable restrictions on the sale of assault weapons. I think that's a common sense reform that needs to happen, just like I support the reform of closing loopholes to these gun shows. We've got to do our part to keep our kids safe, to keep our schools safe, and to move forward on the issue of gun safety in America.
So that's no.
No, I would work in a bipartisan way to have, we need a law that can pass. I mean, the problem with the extremes and these binary choices is we never get to consensus and we fight about it indefinitely. You actually need to work it out. What did Franklin say at the Constitutional Convention? You know, to make a table, you take 2 pieces of good, you take a little bit of each to make a good joint. That's what we've got to do, Tracy. We can't, I mean, sure, okay, say I said no. I didn't. I said I would work in a bipartisan way to get something done so we can move forward.
There's a recent poll, I think it's, I forget the exact number, sorry, but I think it said a majority of New Jerseyans don't have an opinion on you or your candidacy. So tonight, was this sort of a way of you just introducing yourself to the state? Do you think that went well?
Look, it's a sleeper race as it relates to the U.S. Senate races in the country, but I also think it's a closer race than a lot of races in the country. And so, yeah, it's a great opportunity to be out here. We have 2 more debates scheduled. I look forward to those. We are working that's the 75,000 miles on the car, to meet people all over New Jersey. and we're doing it, and people are very excited, I believe, about our campaign because we're not a political insider. We're not a career politician. We are someone that's been on the front lines of the economy, that's created 1,000 jobs, that's helped build the economy of our county. I'm a practical guy. I'm driving up the middle lane of the New Jersey Turnpike here, and I feel like my opponent is on the left shoulder. So I believe I'm the moderate in this race. I'm not a policy wonk. I'm a business guy that works with people to get things done, and I think that a lot of voters are interested in that kind of person going to Washington.
Okay, if we're finished here, we're going to wrap it up with you, Mr. Bashaw.
And you guys next.
We are. We ask all our questions here.
We got a lot of questions in.
We did get a lot of questions in here, and as Mr. Bashaw finishes up here, we're going to be waiting for Andy Kim to come on, and he is going to be taking questions from reporters. Again, you've been watching the last 90 minutes of the debate for U.S. Senate between Curtis Bashaw, the Republican, and Democrat Andy Kim. This has been brought to you by On New Jersey, the Brebovich Institute for New Jersey Politics at Rider University, and also the New Jersey Globe. And I think right now, Mr. Bashaw is going to make his way off the stage, and then we will let Mr. Andy Kim come onto the stage.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bashaw. And we certainly thank our audience for sticking around with us as well. We're going to, again, wait for Mr. Andy Kim to get to the podium. In the meantime, I don't know if we have the camera. Oh, yeah, we can go. Anybody else? We kind of cut ourselves off a little earlier. Any other thoughts, insights as we bring Andy Kim? David, I'll give you 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing is a lot of two candidates willing to answer questions about their candidates.
Well, I mean, they answered questions is kind of what struck me. Yeah. Some other debates you listen to and they say what they want to say, but the candidates certainly answered the questions here. So we have Andy Kim, who has joined us now, and he's going to be taking questions from reporters. So I'm going to turn it around to Mr. Andy Kim, and our reporters are over here, so we will let them take it away. Mr. Kim. Yes, there we go. Part of the crew.
Congressman, Zach mentioned this to Mr. Bashaw. There was a poll that came out that showed that there's still a large portion of the state that doesn't know much about this race or your candidacy. Did this help, and what is there a worry about that at all?
Well, this certainly helps. I mean, look, this is my fourth election, my fourth general election. You know, especially when it came to my very first race 6 years ago. You know, I know what it takes to be able to get my name ID up, to be able to build this. And that's why you see, you know, we're up on TV all across the state. You know, we're going around, you know, I was up in Bergen County earlier, and Monmouth County after that, you know, making sure we're crisscrossing. And certainly, you know, we're getting a great reception all over the state. So we're running, you know, our full court operation. We got 21 county field operations to be able to go out there, and we're going to run the strongest possible campaign as possible. And you know, that's something I have deep experience in doing.
Is it alarming that not more people know that there's a U.S. Senate race going on?
Well, I think they are aware that there's a U.S. Senate race. They want to, you know, have more clarity, you know, more depth. And I think a lot of people have heard my name, but, you know, need to have a better understanding of this. Look, this is a state of 9 million people. You know, that's what, 3% of the American population? That's a lot of people. I mean, my congressional district, 780,000 people. And in my first race, you know, the name ID was probably roughly similar to what this is. But, you know, over time, I got it up over 90% in my congressional district. You know, it takes work to be able to do that. So I understand American people are busy. And, you know, we want to make sure we're getting that out there. It's also unbelievably expensive to communicate in the state of New Jersey, sandwiched between the New York media market and a Philadelphia media market that is probably the hottest media market in the country right now when it comes to political ad spending. So, you know, we want to make sure that we're breaking through.
Congressman, I'm curious if there's any sense of pressure on you, given the fact that the Senate is so evenly divided. Democrats are on defense in a number of red states. It's an open seat in New Jersey after Senator Menendez's bribery conviction. Is there any sense of pressure on you to make sure that you deliver for the party, or that you win the seat for the party? I'm curious if that weighs on you at all, or if that's a factor in any way.
The Senate majority is razor thin. Any single state could flip the balance of this. So if there is not pressure coming on from me from the outside, I certainly am putting pressure on myself to deliver. I'm not doing this because this is something I dreamt of doing. I never thought that I'd run for the U.S. Senate. I stepped up a year ago because I worried that the indictment of Senator Menendez could jeopardize this Senate seat. And so, I wanted to give the people of New Jersey a choice, and recognizing that if the Democrats lose this Senate seat in New Jersey, we lose the Senate majority. It's as simple as that. Now, I get it. There are other states that are, more competitive generally as swing states. But the outcome is exactly the same. Whether it's Michigan or Arizona or Ohio or Montana or New Jersey, if any of these are seats that the Democrats lose, the Senate majority is most likely gone. And what we see is a Republican majority in the Senate that will push forward on extremist justices and judges. Or if it's a President Kamala Harris, will try to block every single thing that she does through the United States Congress. So I very much feel the pressure to make sure that we're delivering, not just for New Jersey, but delivering a majority for this country that can get the important things done.
So obviously you've pushed for peace and a ceasefire in the war in Israel and in the Middle East, and so still, despite that, it only seems to be expanding in terms of its scope and it's how much it's affecting. Chuck Schumer a little while ago said that he thinks that Netanyahu is an obstacle to peace, Prime Minister Netanyahu. Do you think that President Biden has approached that relationship in a way that is conducive to peace in the region?
Well, look, first and foremost, we recognize Israel's right to exist and to be able to defend itself. And we understand that there's a strong partnership and alliance between the United States and Israel, and that's something that's stronger than any one leader. But yes, I do think that there's been real challenge. As I mentioned in the debate, I've talked to a lot of the families of the hostages. A lot of the families of the hostages raising concerns about, Netanyahu's approach and determination and his prioritization of their loved ones, and feeling like as this war expands further and further, that the chance of them being able to be reunited with their loved ones, these hostages, is fading very fast. And that's something that I certainly worry about immensely. Just wanting to make sure that we can bring those hostages home. So, I think that what needs to happen, though, is a lot more pressure, not just from the United States, but, that broader regional coalition, and be able to try to redefine what security means for Israel, recognizing that it's not just about short-term gains, it's about, the long-term security that is needed. And that includes, needing countries like Egypt and Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and others to participate in that. And I think that that's where we're losing sight with. And as someone who's worked in diplomacy before, worked in the Middle East before, I'm certainly trying to mobilize as much as I can think through in terms of that, and engaging with the Biden administration and others to deliver. And that's what I hope we can do now.
When you say losing sight, could you clarify, are you concerned with the United States posture right now? Possibly our troop buildup in the area has somehow emboldened some of the actions that we've seen most recently in the last 10 days?
In terms of the last 10 days, you're saying? Well,
Yeah.
no, I think we've seen that already in motion, even before, the United States has, increased presence there. We've seen just a constant sense of rocket fire from Hezbollah into Israel over the last year that has been on a near daily occurrence. And what we see right now in terms of Iran taking these actions directly targeting Israel for the second time this year, those are escalations that are already under motion. I do think the U.S. we're trying to play a role in trying to prevent this from breaking out into a larger regional war. That's something that I'm very much worried about as someone who's worked there. That was always the nightmare scenario. To some of the points that David Wildstein asked earlier in the debate about what keeps me up at night. I very much worry about the outbreak of regional war in the Middle East, in Asia, and the Taiwan Strait, and elsewhere. So yes, I think that that's really alarming. And the challenge as well is not just what's happening right now, but what happens the day after? You know, and hopefully we can find a way to bring this violence to a close, but this is going to be decades worth of not just rebuilding, but trying to identify, you know, what is actually the new normal when it comes to security and trying to harness that in a significant way. And right now, I don't see the investment into doing that kind of thinking about what comes next and be able to make sure that what comes after is going to be a durable security.
Okay. All right, I think that about wraps it up. Members of the media, do you have all the questions answered? All right, that will wrap things up. Again, I'd like to thank Mr. Andy Kim and also Curtis Bashaw for their time. I'd like to thank our entire production team, our sponsors, our moderators, David, Joey, Micah. I'm Laura Jones. Remember, Election Day is November 5th. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on Debate Night, New Jersey.